Okay. Ping pong. I I did a dumb again. Oh god. Ping pong. Good evening, everyone.
Hello.
Welcome to this weird and super weird. Oh, I am so not prepared to do this way. Hi everyone. With me here right now is Wisnu. It's the first time I'm ever doing this like whole thing, and this is probably going to be the most podcasty version of Geeks at Sea ever. Because for those who did not realize that like I'm doing this in Indonesia, I'm very curious how you found out about this whole program, because as far as I know, I only there's only so few people who actually follow my page, right? But today it's a very unique case for me, because tomorrow is Comic Furo, which is Comic Frontier here in Indonesia, and just so happened that I only do this once every 2 weeks, and the week that I'm supposed to be doing this, I'm landing right here, right now in Indonesia, here in Jakarta, and Comic Furo is this weekend. And I decided to do a very special version of it where I am talking to Wisnu.
Hello. Welcome to Indonesia, first of all. First time here, right?
No, actually, I've been here before.
Oh.
A couple of times, actually, in fact.
Okay.
But first time Comic Furo, actually, to be clear.
Right.
But yeah, here's the thing, right? Like, so, I mean, before we all start all that kind of stuff, but like, we had a lot of technical difficulties this time around, and I just want to warn everyone that today there is a non-zero chance that if the latency gets really bad, what will happen is that I will repost this entire thing up as a video on its own. And it might even go as far as to just be a total like pure audio upload, re-upload or something like that, simply because of how difficult sometimes some of the connections are. We tried to try and get as much of this stuff like set up nicely as possible, but things happen, tech issues. I don't know
tried. I just sit here.
Yeah.
You're so
I don't know how else to describe this. So we've also had some other issues. So please, if the sound isn't as beautiful as it is, please recognize also as well. I had to do a lot of adjustments as much as we can. So I do apologize ahead of time for all that. All that aside, let's get into the fun parts of it. So if you've never been here before, if you've not been here to the channel, welcome to Bimji Streams, currently still named Bimji Streams, and the segment you're going to be watching here today is called Geeks at Sea. It's a little thing that I've been doing for the last 6 times 2, which is roughly like 12 weeks at this point, where I get random people that I know to come in and share about their stories about how they grew up with their geekdom and how it sort of influenced them, or if not, how they've seen their geek experiences evolve over the years that they have. With that in mind, keep in mind that everything that we share here today is going to be highly personal. It is not a statement of truth. Keep in mind, because everybody's memories are faulty, and we're all somewhat unreliable narrators. Some of these stories are going to span decades, so without photographic proof, how reliable can all of us be? Also, if you notice my hands moving a lot, it's because I'm also really nervous. Most of the time when we do this, I'm rarely, if ever, filmed from the chest up, like the shoulders up. I don't know what to do with these things. So I'm moving a lot. And I've also noticed skipped frames as well. So I should have framed this in such a way where I don't get like this. But here's the thing, right? If I shot us like this,
Right.
I would have to be sitting this close to you, and I felt like that was weirder.
A little bit. Is this the first time that you shot one of these live instead of just through the internet?
Yeah, it is because
Yeah.
so like as a thing, right? When I first started this whole thing, the point was always about getting the stories.
Right.
So I didn't want to make it difficult for anyone else. Like I didn't want to do. It wasn't planned to be a studio thing. I don't have a formal like camera setup and all that kind of stuff.
Right.
So the point was always to just have it so that you can bring in whatever you have. You can use your phone or whatever else. I'll try and make sure that we can balance things as much as we can. But the whole shtick was always that we all come in and we just tell our stories.
Right. Well, you know, always a first time for anything.
Exactly. But yeah, so with that in mind, keep that in. Please, once again, bear with us for this time. And and one extra disclaimer, I almost forgot the most important one. We will be speaking about certain entities and certain bodies as well. In some cases, we may have been involved with them, but keep in mind that any opinions or thoughts shared that we do share in this segment are always thoughts and opinions that are our own, meaning that they should not be considered representative of like anybody else, of anyone that we may have been working with or anything else like that. It is just purely ours. So keep that in mind. We're not representatives of any party or anything else as we share these stories. Okay. I also want to do one extra thing because I've noticed my the background music to be a little bit louder than I'm comfortable with. So I'm gonna make that small adjustment first, right?
Well,
So in the meanwhile, which is good because this is where the meat and potatoes start coming in. If you're not familiar with the disclaimers, please, and you couldn't hear me just now, that nervous rambling bit that I did, please go watch the others. In the meanwhile, let's start with the most basic ones that we usually start with, which is Wisnu. Why not? Can you please introduce yourself a little bit and tell me how do you first get into your geekdom, your first geekdom, in fact.
right. Well, I'm Wisnu. I'm a local geek, a local old geek, I guess, kind of like you. And
Well, you say old, right? Like how old are you right now? I actually don't know. By the way, in case you're wondering, we're introduced through a friend.
yeah,
So this, in fact, I've never seen his face live
Right.
till I think what was about 2 hours ago.
I think so.
Less than that, I think.
I didn't recognize you because you were wearing a mask either.
Yeah.
So, anyway, I'm Wisnu. I'm a local geek. I've been involved in a lot of different genre of geekdom. I'm currently working as an interpreter, and I'm also a tabletop designer for some tabletop RPGs and hopefully upcoming board games and war games. But
One thing at a time.
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 Right. So let's talk from about the very beginning. Like, so how do you? What was the first? What was your first introduction to like your geekdom?
Okay, so I think the first, not just me, I think most people in Indonesia, it starts from videos, right? From the beta and the VHS videos. Remember those things, those green cassettes that you have to rewind.
You had green cassettes.
Yeah. Beta, that was the format way back, and it started with some Japanese tokusatsu stuff. It started
Oh,
with
okay.
Goggle 5 and Kamen Rider. Those were some of the first geek fandoms to come into.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay. So tokusatsu stuff was the big ones here in Indonesia first, more than anything else.
Yeah. Well, before that, we do have American cartoons. We do have things like G.I. Joe and
Oh,
things
okay,
like that. But it was never. I think it's a matter of timing, really, because when my generation, when we were 10, 12, those formative years, that's when tokusatsu got big, right? So a lot of people they have good memories of these tokusatsu films that came on to television, and they were dubbed, which is a big deal.
Oh, okay.
Right, because when you watch American cartoons previously, you either have to speak English or you have to read the subtitles, and a lot of people here at that point, they're not very comfortable with their English. So when we started having animes, which had to be translated, because nobody speaks Japanese here, right?
Yeah, obviously.
Right. Despite Japan occupying us for a bit, it was never a language that Indonesians learned. So being able to watch geek TV shows in our own language, I think that's a big deal. I know that they think they did that in your country as well.
Yeah, they did.
Yeah.
In I grew up with a weird sort of peppering of stuff like everything from Kimba the White Lion.
Oh my god.
To
The one that Lion King ripped off.
yeah. Simba. Like wow, so much creativity, right?
Almost the same
Right,
story.
exactly.
Right.
So okay. So hi Emir. So there's that one friend that's actually watching us
Yes.
alongside with us.
Yes.
Anyway, so but yeah, we had Kimba, we had Speed Racer. We grew up
Right.
with Speed Racer a bit. And then what happened was that there was a period where Japanese media content was hitting the airwaves a little bit more on our side. So they included stuff like alongside with the ones that I mentioned just now, like Tomato Man. Yeah, that's a weird one because I only bring that up right now because the last segment I did, I very explicitly asked the person I was with. We were speaking to Mandy last time, and I very explicitly asked her, "Do you remember Tomato Man?"
Oh my god.
And she said no. And then I was like, "Holy shit! Did I just like is this a Bernstein thing or some stuff like that, right?" So I actually went to my timeline. I went on my timeline and asked. I posted up a theme song for it. I found the theme song on it on YouTube, so I did not hallucinate it. It existed. And then I asked my timeline and asked who watched this while they were growing up. And a whole bunch of my friends actually started popping out and saying like, "Oh yeah, we totally did."
Wow.
So it was clearly one of those kind of cases. And that itself, it's a story about really how subjective some of our experiences are. Like you grow up with some things which might not be true for some people, and might not be, which can be true for others and stuff like that. Why a lot of these conversations are about how your early experiences shaped you specifically more than anything else, right?
Right.
Is a lot of the meat and potatoes of what we're doing here, right? Because a lot of what we experience in our early years explains how we see what we see, in the later years, right? So that's where some of this conversation is going to go.
Right.
So yeah, so you went through a lot of tokusatsu stuff, and I have friends who in KL and stuff like that, right? They're really into tokusatsu stuff as well. They've told me before, tokusatsu here in Indonesia is huge.
Oh yeah.
Like it's just ridiculous.
Yes. There's a big. Well, some of our first cosplayers, they do tokusatsu stuff. You can see. You'll probably see these tomorrow.
Yeah.
Where you'll see people cosplaying Kamen Rider, which is always a big deal here because it was one of the first, right? Ultraman has a following here. I guess you can't really count Power Rangers as tokusatsu.
They don't count.
Because it's the American. Well, I guess they do, but it's a whole thing. Because
Well, okay, so I we were talking a little bit offline, but I grew up alongside with like RX, right?
yes,
I also
Black RX.
Yeah, exactly.
I love that one.
Yeah, and I also grew up with Maskman and Flashman.
Right. Yes, I remember Flashman. Yeah.
And those two specifically were dubbed in Malay. That one I remember very explicitly because I was racing home to watch like Ultraman Ace back then.
Oh god.
Yeah,
Ace.
yeah, Ultraman Ace.
That's the one where the girl and the guy.
Yeah, correct. They had the two of them and then stuff like that. And then I actually didn't remember that plot point until someone brought it up. Actually. but yeah, so there was that. And then like Flashman and Maskman, as I mentioned, like so those were the ones that at least for some of us were formative. But like I don't think it ever hit the same levels that you guys got here. But I'm surprised to hear that they don't count as tokusatsu.
Well, you can argue about this, I suppose, right? Because Power Ranger is more American culture because they did.
That's because of Saban and all that.
Yes,
stuff,
because
right?
Saban changed they changed the non-tokusatsu part of it to be it's like the most intense localization because they didn't just change the language.
Right, right.
They changed the entire thing.
They literally localized it.
They
right?
did. Have you ever seen the American Kamen Rider Black?
Oh no, I'm not.
Oh, that was wild. Oh,
Okay, no, okay, we're getting a little bit out of topic here. Let's roll it back in a little bit,
Right.
Because we're supposed to be talking about your starting, right?
Sure,
So you mentioned like your first introduction was through Tokusatsu. When was that? How many years ago was that?
oh
roughly?
God, that was early 90s. So
Early 90s. We're talking about 92.
yeah, something like that. 93, 94, somewhere around there,
Okay.
I believe. There's like a year or two delay
Right.
normally between what comes out in Japan until they bring it over here. It's never at the same time. At that point.
Yeah,
at
yeah.
that point.
Oh, of course, of course.
Right.
The syndication. That's just how it works.
Right. So.
It's before streaming.
Before,
You Zoomer babies need to understand. This is the pre-streaming era.
yeah, and back then it was that, and there were toys. Toys like GI Joe. That was my favorite toy when I was a kid, and I think you're right. It did kind of form what I like today, because nowadays I still enjoy wargaming and modeling, making those little miniatures. And GI Joe was somewhat like that, because you had to assemble the tanks and everything.
Oh, I never knew.
Well, yeah. Not the human models, because
Yeah. I mean, those are action figures, right?
those are just action figures. You do get like little guns that you can slot into their arms, and then you can give them different layouts. But most of the tanks, the planes, all the vehicles, you have to kind of assemble. You have to put on the stickers yourself a little bit, and I think I have really good memories of those, because it was very satisfying for a little kid to be able to say, oh look, I made this thing myself. It was very satisfying when you see like all the parts come together. Yeah, and that's why to this day I still enjoy miniatures, which is how I met our mutual friend Amir. It was also through miniature Warhammer. That's how we met. And so yeah, I have really fond memories of GI Joe toys, even though I technically didn't watch the TV series that much. But the toys, oh man, I love the toys.
Well, okay, so what I'm hearing here, like, so your first approach was really through things like Tokusatsu, and what was your first one again? I'm sorry, I might have missed that.
For Tokusatsu?
Yeah.
Oh, it's Kamen Rider Black.
Well, also,
Oh, sorry, no.
was it?
Before it was Goggle 5. Goggle 5, yeah.
God,
That
I have
was
no idea which one's that one.
well, they all look the same.
My God, I have got to get.
like 5 people, and then like the leader's red, and then the girl forward like.
Well, that's true.
It's true. This isn't a racist thing to say. Yeah, and Goggle 5 was they were a sport, because they always have a gimmick.
Yeah, right, they do.
And Goggle 5 was somewhat of a sports team, because the girl was a gymnast. Like she used like
Right.
ribbons.
So here's a funny thing, right? Like, there was, I think what's interesting, because you were mentioning about Saban and all that during the
Right.
time, which was sort of the, for lack of a better way of phrasing, right? It's like the how the Sentais became sort of mainstream.
Yes.
In a lot of like the Japanese
Right.
geek, for a lot of Japanese geeks kind of thing. Like the Saban choice, or rather the post Saban era, right? A lot of the Sentais ended up being very sort of animal themed kind of thing.
Well, yeah.
I mean, I'm not saying they didn't exist before that, but like they weren't as loud. Like they weren't so like, like, oh yeah, no, you're a hawk or you're a tiger or whatever else there is, right?
Right.
Like prior to that, it was a lot of I mentioned Maskman, right? Like Maskman didn't have animals.
Right.
They were all supposed to be, I still remember it. Like the theme song basically told it, and the opening always does it, right? Where they're like supposed to be 5 people who like train themselves to be like superhuman and stuff like that. It wasn't that they were like imbued by extra powers or the spirit of animals and stuff like that, but they simply were superhuman through training.
Right.
Compare that and somehow robots get involved.
Yeah.
I don't make that stuff up.
That's just how it works.
Yeah, but yeah, compare that to like the post Saban era, right? Saban eras are mostly like, oh yeah, no, here's a set of animals, here's a set of animals, here's a set of animals, and you do that.
They're ninjas also sometimes. Or...
Yeah, there's a theme and stuff like that goes along with it. But the one that you mentioned, like the reason why that kind of stood out is that there was a period in time where a lot of Japanese content were very sports based.
Right.
And earlier days, in particular, if you watch the earlier days of anime and stuff like that, you see a lot of sports animes too.
Right.
A lot more than now.
Yeah, yeah, that's true actually. I haven't seen a lot of, not as much as the old days.
Yeah, there was one period where like a shit ton of Japanese animes were a lot of cooking animes as well, like food related stuff.
I love this.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, it mirrors the trend in real life, right? People make anime about what's popular. That's why you see a lot of animes nowadays about idols and things like that, because that's what young people like nowadays, I guess.
Okay.
So, yeah, and it's the same here as well, because idol is also a big thing here now, which wasn't around. I mean, not around in Indonesia, at least when I was a kid. So it was never really part of something that we are aware of. Not like now; they're everywhere. So, yeah, cool.
All right, so let's go into core of it, because this weekend's coming through.
Yes.
And one of the big questions I've always wondered, like one of the big things I wanted to, I really wanted to do this segment for, right, is to really understand how it's like people like you, right, a fan of the stuff that you like, in particular for you is tokusatsu and stuff like that, right? Like, how was it like being a fan here in Indonesia, like growing up?
Well, first of all, in Indonesia, a lot of these hobbies are very expensive because most of them are imported stuff.
But they all are.
Of course, right. So things like tokusatsu is the one that got popular, or they tend to be the one that is shown on television. If it's not shown on our television, we are rarely aware of it. That's also why a lot of American comic stuff didn't penetrate this market until later, because you have to import them from America. It's very expensive. So yeah, and I think at that point the most accessible one at that point were probably Japanese comic books, and to a lesser degree video games, because obviously video games are more expensive than comic books, right? But we have a lot of Japanese comic books that are translated here, sold for reasonable prices by a local company, Raja Wali Graffiti, Elec Media, things like that. And so I think that's how most people early on really get exposed to mangas and Japanese anime culture to begin with, because buying the VCDs, buying the videos, laser discs, remember those? Yeah, those are very expensive. You have to, at best, you rent them.
They're worth a lot of money though these days.
Yeah, yeah. Well, laser discs?
Yeah.
Oh my
Like
God.
they are collectors nowadays.
Oh, there's, you can't. Do you even have the machines around nowadays?
It's a collector thing.
I guess. So yeah.
Okay, so what were the big titles though when you
When I
were
was
in
a
that
kid,
time?
well, Dragon Ball for sure. That was probably, that's everywhere, right?
Right,
Probably
absolutely.
worldwide. Doraemon, which is I think something that's very popular in Southeast Asia. I
In
don't think
general, yes.
in general, I don't think it was ever that popular in the West, but in here, I think it's very defining for kids.
Yeah.
Because it was made for kids, roughly, despite some of the themes.
Yeah.
Yeah, but that was that. There are some that probably aren't popular worldwide, but they became big hits here because the comic came in here. There's one called Kung Fu Boy, which was, the Japanese name was Tekken Shinmi.
Okay.
Yeah, that's also a very popular thing here. Most geeks my age and one generation below me probably knows that word. It's ingrained in our idea of what pop culture is. But like you said, when you, in Malaysia, there are some things like Tomato Man. I've never watched.
Oh no,
Never heard anything
no.
about it.
So Tomato Man it's a rare one. You're
Okay.
not, even by my standards, it's kind of rare.
Right.
You, like nowadays, if you tell, I use that as an example of just one of those kind of weird things where people like me who were like sort of constantly stuck at home,
Right.
and we'd be watching TV all the time,
Yeah.
kind of thing, we'd pick up on some of these shows. But it's not true for everybody.
Right.
You know, like a lot of people I know can't tell you definitively if they've ever watched Speed Racer on national TV. You know, so that's something that it's not a shared thing, not universally true for most Malaysians.
Right.
Ones that are though, like Doraemon is definitely one.
Yeah.
So here's a weird one. And this is just a cross-cultural comparison kind of thing, right? Where would you normally buy like Dragon Ball and Doraemon and all these here in Indonesia back in the day?
Well, there are big bookstores like Gramedia. That's normally where you buy them, but at the same time, you see them being sold like by the streets in like small stalls at that point. So yeah, it was pretty easy to get here. Some of them were probably illegally obtained because they had to change the name of the title. So yeah, and sometimes the translations are kind of sketchy. Yeah, but
So okay, wait. So I want to dig into this one a little bit. Yeah. So at least for you guys here, some of these companies were actually sort of pirating the mangas themselves and doing localizations and just specifically to sell to Indonesians as well.
absolutely.
All right, so okay, so we have that parallel shared as well. We have that in common as well, because over in Malaysia when we were growing up, right? Like there was a period where there's this publisher we know as S.E.A.
Right.
And a lot of us didn't know at the time, but they were apparently if I'm not mistaken, a Penang-based publishing company that just literally was just pirating the shit out of it, all this stuff. We didn't know. I'm not saying we didn't do anything wrong. I'm just saying that we were the kids and we were poor.
Yeah, we didn't know.
Right? So we really didn't know. There were also ones that were translated into Malay.
Right.
Those, as far as we knew, were properly licensed. We really don't know for sure. I can't speak for it. But those included stuff like Dragon Ball and what the Japanese know as Dragon Quest Dino Daiboken. For us, it was translated as Mystery Naga.
Yes. So it's
true
somewhat
for you guys too?
almost it's Dragon Quest here.
It's Dragon Quest here.
Dragon Quest here.
Yeah. So here's the thing, right? I realized that's one thing that's very interesting because for anyone who knows anything about like Indonesia, Bahasa Indon and Bahasa Malaysia, right? Like the languages are really, really similar. We have enough like overlap, right? That if you you're agnostic enough about terminologies, you can sort of pick up everything. My favorite example has been kamar kecil,
Right.
which is literally the Indonesian term for toilet. And Malaysians, we use tandas, which has no meaning here.
No.
So yeah,
And kamar kecil simply means small room.
it's in a more stricter Malay sense, it's actually small tent.
Tent.
Yeah, kamar is exclusively used for tent in Malaysia.
Oh my god, that must
Yeah.
be confusing.
As I said, we're slight mildly
I know,
different. So you as I said, if you're agnostic about the language, you sort of pick it up along the way. But having said that, like I've also realized that there's some very interesting translation differences, and I just want to do this segue because we are talking about like the initial mangas that we were exposed to, right? So over in Malaysia, Dragon Ball is translated as Mutiara Naga,
Right.
which is what I was talking to my friend about. Like it was very likely a translation that was influenced by the Chinese name.
Yes.
Because if you know the Chinese name, it is actually literally Dragon Pearls. If you were to literally translate it to English.
Right. Yeah.
Right. So
They did call it Dragon Ball Z here. For some reason, they changed some of the characters' name into Indonesian names.
Oh, really?
So, yeah. So that's the pirated version, right?
Right.
But at the same time, they also have the official version coming out at the same time, slightly more expensive, slightly thinner, so you have to buy like 2 books to get like one. But those one have the real names. So as a kid, it was kind of confusing because you go,
Right.
why are they different, right?
right. Okay. So that's definitely true, at least on my side, because what happened was that Vegeta
Yes.
in the translated versions the Malay translated versions that we were exposed to, right?
Right.
Was Bezita.
Right, which is somewhat it's
Close enough.
It's a pronunciation issue
I don't
more than anything, I think. Right? Yeah.
So okay, so Dragon Ball is one. You guys, so I did Dino Daiboken, which is what we call Mystery Naga.
Right.
Did you guys have Dino Daiboken here too?
Yeah, but it was never as popular as Dragon Ball Z, so it didn't. I think it didn't like last that long. Like Dragon Ball, it went until the very end. But I think Dragon Quest, because it's actually pretty long, right?
It was 40 something.
Yeah.
No, it's not. It's 30 something only. It's shorter than Dragon Ball, actually.
Yeah, Dragon Ball is still going on now.
Well, I mean, no. I'm talking about like the initial run prior to GT.
Right. So yeah, I don't think the Dragon Quest one lasted till the end. I think at some point they probably decided this isn't selling
Oh, okay.
as well, so they decided not to.
But you guys still know it as Dragon Quest.
Yeah, we do. It's
Okay.
Dragon Quest. I believe it is Dragon Quest. Yeah.
All right.
It's,
Then let's go because we're going through a small list of stuff. I just want to know like was there any other titles that were huge at least here in Indonesia?
for Japanese comics, right?
Well, I mean others if you like if you care to name them.
We had quite a bit of Chinese kung fu.
Really?
stories. Yeah, Tony Wong. Tony Wong.
Yeah.
Yeah, Tony Wong stuff was pretty popular here. They had like what was it, Tiger Wong. It had, but this one they had to translate into Bahasa Indonesia because most of the titles I think were in Chinese, right?
Right.
So they had to translate into local ones like so. It was Tiger Wong was called Tiger Wong, and then there's Tapak Sakti, which was magical palm. I forgot. I think the
Tapak Sakti. Okay.
right. So I believe that's twins. If you've ever read the Tony Wong comic.
Oh, I know which one you're referring to.
Yes,
roughly.
it's the one about the babies were separated.
Yeah. God, I can't remember. Like so there was a
twins. Something like
no. There was a I know. 绝对上交.
Yes.
That's the Mandarin name for it.
Right. Yeah. So these were also pretty popular.
forever.
And these were also pretty popular, and they're somehow cheaper because they come out in like thin thin magazines instead of Dragon Ball, which is slightly bigger and thicker.
Yeah.
These ones just cost at some point I think 2,000 rupiah, which is now you can't even buy anything with 2,000 rupiah. So yeah, those were popular. American comics to a smaller degree. Some of them were translated. So Batman, Spider-Man, all the big names had a little presence here, but they were never really for kids. I think they were more for teenagers. So it was probably not as popular as the Japanese comics like Dragon Ball, which kids can. It's more for every age, really, right? Dragon Ball. Anyone can read Dragon Ball. Ranma was also a popular one here.
So printed Ranma was actually here as well.
Yes, printed Ranma was here is one of the more popular ones. And then you get Sailor Moon at some point, but that's more of an anime TV thing. It's not a comic thing, but it was still one of the more popular TV series. Yeah, and that was the boom. The boom for anime was late 90s when we have things like Samurai X, Rurouni Kenshin. I think these are the ones that got really mainstream because they were on TV. Comic books, you have to go find them. But if it's on TV, like you just go home from school, you turn it on, and you have easy access to it, right? And that being technically kind of free is really what made it popular here. Because again, not having to spend money to enjoy them, it's a big deal here.
So, but for you guys, sorry, for you specifically, right? A lot of your initial introductions, like you mentioned, like was Dragon Ball, and then
Right.
It hitting the shelves clearly has made an influence here
Yes.
locally as well.
Yes.
How, at least from what you've described, it seems like the penetration for Japanese comics for some reason was also much higher than say even the stuff like the Hong Kong comics or even the Western comics as well here in Indonesia as well. Does that sound about right?
Yes. I think it's also because there's just it's a numbers thing.
Yeah.
Right. From the Chinese comics that we get Tony Wong stuff and not that much else. But when it comes to mangas, they just put out so many different titles that if you go to the Gramedia, there's like one whole section that's just like mangas piled like from end to end, and that made it that gave it a wider penetration because let's be honest, like not everyone is into the whole kung fu genre, right? But mangas had a genre for everyone. It had like for girls you'd get like romance stuff, you get shoujo stuff, you get for boys you do have the shonen stuff. So I think that's why eventually mangas became very popular here because everyone can find something that they like in it.
That's fair.
Yeah.
Just for comparison's sake, yeah. Just to share a little bit and just for comparison's sake, over over in KL, where I grew up, we saw something that's pretty similar, in a sense that Japanese comics and Hong Kong comics, right, were almost equal in terms of distribution. You don't see them a lot in the mainstream bookstores and stuff. But what happened was that if you were to go to, say, what we call what we would call kedai runcits, which were sort of this roadside convenience stores and stuff,
Right.
like they would just randomly sell stuff and things like that. If you go there, they would have the guys would have like racks of it up, or any magazine shop by the side of the road. They would have it like strung up or clipped up and stuff like that.
Right.
And you just pluck it out and you can like pay, and then you walk home with it.
Yeah.
The thing about it was that I think you're right in the sense that in terms of variety, it definitely hit home with a lot more people. But I think one big thing is that it's a question of cost to some level as well. Like one book of Dragon Ball back in the time, like when we were buying our side, right, was like I think I think at the cheaper end was about 350 ringgit.
Right.
I'll leave you to do the translation for that one. But then what happened was that, but at the same time, if you were to buy a Hong Kong comic, right, which is like so much thinner.
Yeah.
Yes, it's colored. Yes, it's larger. And I'm not saying that like artwork is a like preference kind of thing, right? But like one of those was, if I'm not mistaken, if I remember correctly, was about roughly about 2 ringgit.
Right.
And you get about what essentially was less than a tenth of the content.
Yeah.
I know you can't really measure it this way, but if you are running on a budget and you're going to choose like one thing to spend money on,
Yeah.
you're clearly going to lean into the Japanese comic stuff, right? So I think accessibility played a huge role in how quickly the market sort of picked it up, because fact is, right, and this might not be true for everyone, but in KL at least, Hong Kong comics was there first.
Oh, before Among Us.
Yes,
Right.
exactly.
What's the popular one?
So I was talking to, full disclosure, I'm not a huge fan of Hong Kong comics, like, as in the sense that by the time I started looking, Japanese mangas were already on the shelves.
Right.
But I know for a fact Hong Kong comics were there first, because a lot of the early day influences for comics in KL were between Hong Kong comics and Western comics.
Right.
I know that because my parents, or my dad at least specifically, had friends who were reading stuff like Spider-Man and all that kind of stuff. I had a friend who, my dad's friend actually, had an issue 1 Spider-Man.
Issue 1.
Yeah. Which was in trash condition.
Yes. If only he knew.
Yeah, I
right?
know,
if
right?
Only he knew it was
Yeah,
gonna be
but
expensive.
which kid ever thought about it
That's
that
true.
way? But
That
anyway,
is
so he grew up with that. So I know for a fact that Western comics were in Malaysia well ahead of any other comics, and Hong Kong comics as well. But what happened was that not only did Hong Kong comics always felt more violent and all that kind of stuff, like it always felt like it was just something you spend a lot of money on, with minimal amount of like sort of entertainment value kind of thing. To be fair, like it really depends on how you cut the cake, so to speak,
Right.
and what you're comparing against. But this was definitely one of those kind of things where it's like, okay.
Yeah, and I think the comics, the Japanese comics here that got really popular are things like Doraemon, which is very it's you can read it over and over.
Yeah.
Right. But I can't say the same about the Hong Kong comics that I grew up with, because like you read it like, oh, it's a fight, they're fighting, you know.
Right.
And Doraemon, it's popular with, it's split into small bite-sized stories, right? And each book would have like 10 chapters or so, 10 different stories. So you can read it over and over. So that's probably
I want to put it out here. While we're discussing it, it might sound like we're saying that Hong Kong comics aren't as good. I need to, for everyone here who's listening here, to really understand that this comes back down to preference. I personally still really do love Hong Kong comics. I actually one of the, like, I've had the pleasure of meeting Andy Seto actually, who did oh crap, I suddenly can't remember the title. He did a sequel to it recently, and he's still working actually, surprisingly, after so many years. Amazing artist. One of the local organizations in KL, who works very closely with Comic Fiesta, actually brought him over like a couple of years back.
Yeah.
And I like when I saw him there and I saw his work, I was like, holy shit, yeah, I'm giving you all my money. Yeah, like whatever you have, give me one. I'm walking away with one of these things. But yeah, so I'm a huge fan of it. It's just that when you're running on a budget as a kid and you're growing up in your early years trying to consume and look for media that entertains you, right? Like if you're running on a shoestring budget, you're definitely going to count these dollars and cents.
Right. And but also another thing is the ratings. I think
Right.
when I was a kid, a lot of the Hong Kong comics they have violence. They sometimes have nudity. These are things that.
Well, I have to ask then, like, how bad is the censorship here in Indonesia?
The illegal ones not so much. But later on, you get like, not as bad as the Malaysian one that I have heard about.
Yeah, no,
At worst, they just cover it with a blob, and that's it. That's and it's only certain mangas that are kind of that have nudity get censored, but like things like cigars and things like they leave that on.
Okay.
Right, because in some places they take those out as well.
Is that a thing here in Singapore? Oh, sorry, in Indonesia?
What
Cigarettes?
No,
no,
God, no.
right? Like cigarette censorship's not a thing here, right?
No, you have like 6-year-olds buying smoke by the side of the road. Like you can't.
I applaud.
Censor.
I applaud the honesty. I applaud the honesty. But
No. It's part of culture here as well.
okay, cool. Like no, because I only say that because Malaysia did censor a lot. Like for Hong Kong comics, you'd actually have cases where they're like everybody would draw pants on.
Yes.
Even when they're actually technically wearing pants, it's just like the skin color tone just gets too close. There's that problem. And then you'd have problems where sometimes it's like, oh, yeah, like you'd like they'll put in bars or they'll be like, oh, the Japanese bars are not enough, and they'll just draw on top of it and stuff like
Bigger
that.
bar.
It's weird though, like when we talk about censorship, mostly because I think some of those decisions to censor it draw more attention to it than anything else. Like sometimes you don't even think about it, but like, oh wait, this thing is even more like louder now.
Yeah, absolutely.
But it wasn't until I only asked about cigarette thing because somewhere in the late 90s, Malaysia actually some comics actually started censoring cigarettes in Malaysia.
In Malaysia,
Yeah.
they just take that out. Do they just block it, or do they do?
They just block it out.
Okay.
They don't replace it. They just block it out. Like
they don't want to put in that much effort.
yeah, correct. So you see someone holding something,
Right.
and you see smoke, but there's nothing to be seen.
That's
It's cute.
it's funny. Yeah. So no. But nudity is definitely because it also comes down to different culture have different tolerance for nudities, right? And I think in Indonesia that was something that wasn't really tolerated, especially because in the eye of technically most mangas have an age rating,
Right.
but here nobody pays attention to that.
Yeah.
I sell it to everyone, right?
Right.
Yeah. So in that sense, the parents can get really angry when they like, why does my kid have this book where there's like nudity in it or things like that? So that's something that didn't catch on to most parents, because even now a lot of older people still think like, what, comic books, that's just for kids. Like once you're an adult, once you're 20, you shouldn't be reading that because that's for kids. So this is a view that I still see around here, and which is a shame because technically some of them were never written for kids, right?
Of course.
Yeah. So
I mean, I definitely think Spawn wasn't for kids.
no.
I, for one, absolutely think Spawn wasn't for kids.
It was, of course. Absolutely. It was like, it was the most mature of all the three, right? DC, Marvel, Image, right? That was Spawn.
Spawn is Image. Spawn
yeah.
is Image.
Yeah, because DC and Marvel, they're trying to be like all age, and then there's Image, which is definitely for.
I think Spawn bought I think DC bought Image after that.
Yeah, something like that.
Way besides the point, but like, okay, so so let's come back a little bit here. You did mention that like it was not until um, things like Rurouni Kenshin and all that
Yes.
started hitting the airwaves here in Indonesia, that that it really became like a huge thing here in Indonesia. And also because we are talking about Komifuro here tonight, I have to ask, like, so did conventions only come after or before this wave?
Way after. Way
Alright.
after. So, Komifuro started, the first one, I believe, it's in 2012. Now, before that, you do have smaller ones, like in college, like every college would have like an anime club and they would sometimes make these little festivals, but it was never something that's big that you would find advertisement for in public spaces.
So all this is like 2000, early 2000.
2012 is when the big ones, when the big festivals
Right.
started. 2012, because that's when AFA, Anime Festival Asia, first came to Indonesia, and it was a really big deal because AFA would have concerts,
Right.
and they would bring big Japanese names, big Japanese performers that are popular in the anime circles, and before then you almost never see Japanese Japanese bands here. So that was the first one that really made people go, oh, okay. Now there's a professionally handled event handled by.
Right. So prior to that, like, I'm sorry. Prior to that, right? All the college events were just small local college events.
Yes.
And this like, do you have any recollection at all, like when this all started? Like when college events like these all started?
Okay, so college events have been around for a while, but when we're talking about the ones that specifically is for animes, that's not every campus would have an anime club or things like that. And I do think the first one that I've seen was around 2007 or so. They started having they started having anime clubs in some of the bigger campuses, but before then it was mostly just buy comics or you watch it on television and that's it. Yeah. And now it's very different. Now locals starts in festivals, locals start making their own merchandise, fan merch, which you will see tomorrow because that's what.
Oh, wait. So you've reached over to the artists already,
Right.
Right. So let's not get ahead of ourselves a little bit because let's slowly go through the stories a little bit here.
Okay.
Because at least where I'm looking at is like what I'm curious about at least at this point is the local events that at least for you that you. Would it be fair to say, I suppose, is where the question is, do you think it would be fair to say that like the idea of anime events, right, was sort of normalized by these college events? Or do you think it was only because Alpha ID showed up and said, oh yeah, this is going to be a thing?
Well, there's levels to it, right? Before Alpha ID, it was mostly a place where you can buy, say, VCDs, pirated, of course. You can buy you can buy things that you would not normally find elsewhere.
So these are all the college events.
Yes, the smaller ones, they would have like they would just have one stall in the big. The event itself would not be specifically this is an anime event.
No.
It would just be like a festival where people would sell things and there would be a corner where somebody's selling these either Japanese music CDs or movies and anime series.
So you wouldn't, strictly speaking, have like it wouldn't be like a geek con or a geek event kind of thing. It was more like, okay, hey, we're doing this event, and then at a corner of this will be a themed corner kind of thing, or some guys will be selling these specific like genre specific content and things like that, or merchandise and things like that.
Yes, that was around. I mean, I was in high school and college. It was still very niche. You would have to go in Jakarta's a big city,
Right.
and then you would have to go from one end to a different part just to get the VCDs for animes, because it's not something that you just find in supermarkets and things like that. So yeah. That was the dark days, man.
Okay, so on that note, just funny story, at least on just for comparison's sake, yeah. In KL, I I can't say this for sure because I can't remember which came first. But after, as far as so okay, I want to ask a real quick thing here first because you mentioned you mentioned beta earlier.
Right?
There's a Betamax.
Outing my age.
Yes, yes, cassette tapes and all that stuff.
Yeah.
Did you guys ever had rentals here?
Yes.
So rentals were a huge thing here as well, is it?
Not entirely huge because not every household would have a laser disc. It was a luxury item of sorts here. But it's all I did. My household did.
Right.
And there were a few places where you can get rentals, and so yeah, it did exist, just not very common.
The reason why I asked is because here's the funny thing, right? Like, I mentioned to you earlier about RX and all that.
Yes.
The funny thing is that a lot of RX wasn't entirely on national TV.
Yeah.
Some parts of it were, but you don't necessarily catch everything and all that kind of stuff. What happened was that, however, you could actually rent tapes from places back when, back in the, I think it was early 90s in KL, and you could take that home and you can watch. And I was in a bunch of places where some kids would like rent it, and then all of us would gather near his place and we would watch it together with his TV and stuff.
Yeah. It was in Japanese.
I don't recall. I mean, the fact is, I'm Chinese literate, so they could have had the Chinese dub as well.
Right.
Yeah, but where I was getting at with this was that there was some interest in the content already, and then what happened was as we went along, and especially when anime started like getting larger and larger, we had sort of these night markets, and then people would put out stuff to sell. And then in these night markets, right, you would find people who were selling pirated VCDs.
Right.
So alongside stuff like movies and all that kind of stuff, where they're all cinema quality, if you get what I'm getting at, we had cases where like people would be selling episodes of Pokemon, or Dragon Ball movies and stuff like that. They were all very poorly labeled. You had no idea what you're gonna get.
Right. Right.
But that was sort of like a part of the it's part of the content story of how the content got penetrated within KL and stuff like that.
Right.
It sounds like, based on what you're sharing, it sounds very similar here in Indonesia as well.
Yeah.
Except that you didn't go through a night market. You went through like college, sort of college events like these where they would be somewhat targeted.
Yeah. It was also there. Normally, it's colleges with either an anime club or a Japanese culture club, are the ones where they would actually do these things. Because anywhere else, it was still niche to a certain degree, even though most kids did grow up watching them. A lot of kids kind of grew out of those phases when they reach like 18, 19. They kind of grow out of it right in here, and they find different interests. So yeah, it was not very mainstream, even though most kids did grow up watching animes.
So at least, conventions as we would imagine, like events like Komifuro, as well as S.E.A and all these, technically didn't exist in Malaysia. In Indonesia until then. By the way, in case anyone's wondering, right, there's a lot of slip of the tongues for me tonight because I'm just not used to talking about Indonesia. This is how bad it is for me. I just gotta put it out there. So I'm sorry.
You're doing okay. You're doing good.
But so at least here in Indonesia, right, like conventions that how we would imagine conventions, right, did not exist prior to Komifuro and S.E.A.
No, not to the level where you see people cosplaying.
Let's not talk about levels. Let's just talk about a general ambience and like having a dedicated one saying, we're an anime event kind of thing.
No, never. Maybe not never, but certainly not very visible. From my experience, anyways. In the ones that I visit, it's never up front center. It's always somewhere in a corner.
Right. So it's like a theme corner kind of thing.
Yeah.
So was your first Was your first event then like Comic Furo or Alpha ID? I guess it's
Alpha ID was my first real convention, I would say. And I think for a lot of people it was. It's the first one where you go in. What was that? Oh,
I'm just giving Alpha ID a thumbs up.
Okay.
Like, hey, good work, guys.
Right.
I'm not, I don't pitch for them. I have no relation to them.
Okay.
Just putting out there.
Okay.
Like, I'm a Comic Fiesta guy. Anyway, but yeah.
Oh.
But hey, game recognized game.
So yeah, it was Alpha ID was the first big one. It was the first one where you get so many people in one place at once, where everyone was there for anime. They sell merchandise. They sell official merchandise, which was a big deal for everyone. There was even like you can win autographs, which seems like something impossible for us at that point. I got an autograph poster from May End. Do you remember who?
Yeah.
That was Alpha 2012, I think. And so for us, it really became real once that happened, because we're finally like, oh, official. These are official merch. It's not just pirated stuff. It's not just things that you import, things like that. So that was a really big deal.
I do apologize for the small adjustments on the camera, because so here's the thing, right? Like, I don't do this.
Right.
Like, this is the first time I'm truly on location, and the weirdest thing is that my camera keeps tilting halfway.
Huh.
I think it's the weight of the charging cable.
Could be.
And what happens is that it starts tilting halfway. I was like staring at it for the longest amount of time, and I just couldn't get it out of my head. And I was like, no, I need to tweak this.
Right.
I'm horrible. I need staff. But anyway, so yeah. Okay, wait. So for you guys, Alpha was also sort of the first opportunity for you guys to get like legit merch and legit experiences here in Indonesia.
Yeah, where we get to meet people who are from the industry, who the voice actors, the singers. Yeah, it was when Macross Frontier was very popular, so that's why they brought in Mayan. Yeah, that was 2012. And that was my first experience, really. It wasn't perfect. They did it in like in something that looks almost like a warehouse somewhere in a remote part of Jakarta. You have to take a while to get there, but you grew up with it so much, you kind of love it from afar, and then it's finally in front of you. So we were very happy at that point. Yeah,
That's fantastic.
yeah.
So okay, I have to ask then, like, what was like, you mentioned a bunch of things. Was there any particular memory for you from that night, from that weekend in particular?
From Alpha.
Yeah.
Oh, there was a cosplay competition, I remember. So this goes back to the Tokusatsu one. At that point, even though I say that it's a very niche hobby, Indonesia already had like some pretty famous cosplayer that cosplays Tokusatsu stuff. I think his name was Richfield. He already went through like conventions and cosplay competitions all over Asia. So yeah, I remember seeing. I think he was there, and that was when my friends also kind of realized that, wow, Indonesia does have a big anime scene. It's just that you rarely meet these people all in one place, right? At best, you see them online in forums. So yeah, that was. I also met. Who was that? I think there was a few big bands there. Mayan was there. Calafina was the next year. Calafina was 2013, I think. There's Lisa, who's also a big artist at that point. And yeah, it was mostly the concert, because I don't go to concerts a lot. That was a big concert for me. And so yeah, it was a really good memory, because I remember my friends were also very happy, because we were all Macross fans, and it was really funny because we watched Macross, the old one, right? and Frontier came out quite a bit later. So when normally when a band comes out, will the older anime, the older weebs, they don't, some of them don't know it, or if it's an older artist, the younger ones don't know it. So sometimes like one side stands up in applause and the other one stands still. But when it was Macross, both sides kind of everyone knows what it is, because it was something that old geeks and young geeks knew, because it went through two different eras, Frontier and the first one. So yeah, it was, had a really good time at that point.
It's fantastic.
Yeah. We don't have a lot of those anymore, I don't think. ID vanished for a bit here. I don't know exactly why, but I think they're coming back. They just came back.
Yeah,
actually.
yeah. Was it just
last week.
It was
Just last week. Some of my friends.
Right. I think I remember. Yeah, I remember like some people were posting up images and it just. Yeah, it was definitely just last week.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, my brain.
Well, you're tired. You're just.
No. It's one of those kind of things where I'm like I'm getting my timelines mixed up a little bit more.
Right.
But
So, yeah. But I didn't go to that one. Mostly because I don't watch that many animes now. So I think some people. I only watch an anime if I know it's good and it matches my interest. I know a lot of my friends who are more hardcore. They follow every. They know like what new anime will come out this season.
Yeah.
Right, and then they'll watch that. They'll watch everything that comes out. I don't do that. I'm pretty selective. So yeah, but.
All right. So okay. So your first event was Alpha.
Yeah.
ID. When was your first comic photo then?
It was exactly that year too.
Okay, so it's 2012 as well.
2012 as well. It wasn't as exciting yet at that point, because it didn't. You have to understand that Alpha ID and Komifuro are two very different things, right? Alpha ID is about bringing the Japanese companies, the Japanese performers. They bring these big guests from the industry here, and Komifuro is more about local creators. You will see that in Komifuro, it's just like rows and rows and rows and rows of local creators making merch, fan arts, and things like that. And at that point, I was more interested with Alpha ID because it's the bigger, flashier of the two. But as time goes by, I visit Komifuro more and more because one, a lot of my friends are also artists, so they make fan art, they make merch, and I go there to support them because we support our we try to support our community here, and two, the goods are just a lot cheaper because they're made here. And this is why it's so big, because there are some really good artists in Indonesia, and they sell their goods here, which cost a fraction of what it is if you buy an official stuff. So yeah, I don't know if that'll get you in trouble or not, but hey.
I think it's important to recognize the role of doujins in fandom nowadays. So believe it or not, like, because I was part of the organizing teams and stuff like that, we've had a lot of conversations about copyrights as well. Like I was sharing earlier about how a lot of the early days of Malaysian fandoms and stuff like that, a lot of it came from what essentially was seeded interest done by pirates. Right. So it's not a nice thing to think about, but the fact is, behind like all the legitimacy, like the things that you need to make things legitimate and the costs involved and everything else, the sad truth is that it results in this overhead that makes some of these contents just not accessible. Right. So that's why piracy becomes a thing. Right. So but as an organizer, you have conversations, very serious ones as well, because some of these pirates are going to be people who are going like, hey, can we join you? Can we come into your event? Because this is our audience, right? Like, and a lot of them are people that they have sort of seeded the community of people that whose interests that they have actively seeded and sort of nurtured through providing access of these pirated materials.
Right.
Right. So it's not a convenient or comfortable thing to think about, but it's absolutely what happened.
Right.
Right. I'm not going to pretend that it doesn't. I don't think that that's going to do anyone any real favors.
Do you have the equivalent of Komifuro back home, where it's a big convention, but primarily for local?
That would be
creators?
Comic Fiesta.
Comic Fiesta. Okay.
So I'll get into that one a little bit with you because it's a very interesting comparison, but we'll get into that once we've more or less finished Comic Furo stories. Once again, once we go through a step, right, what I'll do is I'll share a little bit about Malaysia's side there.
Yeah.
And then so that everyone who's happening to be listening can have something nice to compare with.
Right.
Right, at least between these two countries.
Mm-hmm.
The reason, so the thing I was getting at was like, it's, as an organizer, you do have these conversations about copyright and how do you deal with pirates and stuff like that. And whether you like it or not, in a very stricter sense of it, right, doujin making is copyright infringement.
Right. Sure.
It's an uncomfortable way of thinking about it,
Right.
but it absolutely, to the letter of the law, is copyright infringement.
Yeah.
Is because at some level, profiteering over the likeness of a character that is made by through somebody else's IP is fundamentally that. But I think at some level, like everyone sort of understands that there is a line where you kind of like it gets kind of silly because when an artist makes fan art and sell, and they're trying to celebrating the fandom and all that kind of stuff and trying to make a living and all that kind of stuff. There's the obvious aspect to this where it's just bad PR and all that, right?
Right.
But there's the more serious part of it where you're not doing things at a scale that would fundamentally damage the company or the brand.
Right.
And in many ways, the arrangement or the exercise of like this celebration of fandom and stuff like that, right? Makes it in such a way that the company sometimes actually profit from it simply because of the free marketing and,
Yes.
and the discussion and the talking and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So actively encouraging the behavior of creating fan art and derivative works can sometimes come back and be very beneficial to the company.
Right.
There have been many cases where obviously there's been more harm than good, and it is a more complex topic than we should be doing over over tonight. But it's absolutely the case.
Yeah.
Right. But when it comes to like fan works and stuff like this, in these kind of cases where things like Comic Furo, where it's hey, local artists come out, draw your things, earn a buck based on what you draw and stuff like that, sell it, make money, make a living.
Right.
All that is something that I think for most people, it's like most companies are perfectly fine with it.
Yeah. And so they don't only sell fan art, I guess. I should say that a lot of them would also sell original work or their own comics or their own mangas that they write. So there's a wide variety of things that are being sold with the one unifying theme being that these are local creators selling their stuff to fans. So yeah.
So so I want to dive right into it a little bit quicker here.
Yeah.
But like, so you said that the first Comic Furo that you went to was also in 2012.
Yes.
So the first Alpha ID was what, May, was it?
I think so. Oh man, I don't really remember.
But it's somewhere in the first half of the year.
I think so, yeah.
When was the first Comic Furo then?
I think it was after I
Immediately?
could be wrong. No, not immediately. I think a few months after.
Oh.
I could definitely be wrong. It's been 12 years, so but I think it's after Alpha ID. Yeah. I don't even remember where it is. I do remember going there because I remember going there and thinking, oh, okay, this is not as flashy as Alpha ID, but there are some interesting stuff to buy.
What brought you there the first time then?
Well, first of all, I think it's a lot of my friends are very into the culture because a lot of my friends are in these anime clubs. And at that point, I had quite a bit of anime that I was watching, so it just appealed to me, the idea that you can go to these events, meet people that likes the same thing that you like, because that was pretty hard, especially in my campus. I was probably the one anime fan, at least in my classes. So to be able to find people who like the same thing, that was really great for us. And well, nowadays you can find them anywhere, really, because anime is exploding. But at that point, really, that was just the appeal, just to find the community, and get fan arts too. Those were cool.
So correct me if I'm wrong on this one, but like, what brought you to Comic Furo the first time, right? More than anything else, was simply the idea of meeting more
Yeah.
people who like the same stuff that you did.
Right. Yeah. And just being around it, because I guess
Breathing in the atmosphere.
yeah. Because these are things you read about online, right? Like, oh, you hear about Comic Cat,
Right.
you hear about things like that,
Yeah.
and we had no illusions that it would be to that level. Of course not, but it was a start, I guess. So we it was for us, for my friends at least, it felt like the start of a bigger anime culture starting in Indonesia.
Do you have any recollection of any impressions of like how many booths there were, or how was the audience? Like, how was the attendance like?
For Komifuro,
Yeah, the first
I
one.
think Alpha ID was the bigger one. No, it was a very crowded.
This is Alpha ID. Very crowded as Alpha ID.
Yeah, Komifuro was not as crowded as Alpha ID as I remember it. Alpha ID had more cosplayers, I believe. Sometimes people aren't cosplaying. I thought they were cosplaying, but that's just their regular outfits. Yeah.
Malaysia had that phase too. Like, we have
Okay.
people where it's like, oh yeah, hey, look, there's some goth kids.
Yeah, it's just, oh, they're
Oh
not.
wait, they're not.
They're just
goth. They're just goth.
Yeah.
They're just emo.
Oh, is that from Death Note? Is that from?
Yeah. No. It's just them. It's just them.
how they dress. Yeah. So at that point, Komifuro did not catch me as much as Alpha ID yet. Yeah, it was definitely the smaller of the two. Now it's my favorite, really.
All right. So obviously that means that through the span of like 12 years, things have changed, right?
Yes.
Walk me through that.
Well, first of all, the big thing that changed was that Alpha ID stopped coming to Indonesia for a while. I don't know exactly why. There were theories. I'm not gonna get into it, because I don't know if they're legitimate theories or not.
So we're not going to feed into any unsubstantiated theories tonight.
Yeah.
At least tonight.
Yeah. I mean, I don't want to say something unless I know. At least I know it's legitimate, right? And Komifuro kept growing because of the creator community kept growing, and we got it was Alpha ID was somewhat about who they can get, right? So the first year they managed to get me in, so all the Macross fans would come along. But in Komifuro,
No, please go.
yeah, Komifuro is more tailored, because like if whatever is popular, that's what you're gonna find in Komifuro. So like right now, let's say for comparison, this year I expect a lot of Genshin content, Genshin Impact, Honkai, Star Rails, because those are the biggest, some of the biggest fandoms here. So you'll see a lot of fan arts and merch of those. Whereas Alpha ID can't really. I don't think they can do that. I don't think they can go like, oh, okay, this is popular. We'll just bring all these, because it's harder to get the artists, to get the companies involved, right? Because of scheduling and everything. And at some point, Komifuro really becomes its own culture. The convention culture in Indonesia, it's kind of fascinating, really. It's when a lot of people, like I told you, like this is day -1 of Komifuro. There's 100 artists somewhere all over town right now, frantically printing their merch for tomorrow. And then whenever you go there, you just go, oh, I met you last year. Oh, I remember your stall. I bought something from you. So it has that grassroots feel, but at a really large scale. It's very different from those days in the campuses where it's just like a small corner now like it's like a celebration of the hobby, you know. It's just everyone gets to display, this is what we love, this is what we like, this is the fandom that's currently popular, and it's very it can, for some people it's also profit, because
Yeah,
if
definitely.
I don't think most of them will make any significant profit. I think like only some of the best ones will come out of it like with a lot of money, but they get to meet people, they get to socialize, they get to network, and they get to promote their work as well. You know, so that appeals to me as somebody who also enjoys creating things. It's nice to be around those people, at least for me. Yeah.
So has anything in particular like changed in the last 12 years that sort of stands out for you?
For Komifuro?
Yeah, just for comparison, right? Let me just share a little bit, since I did promise to share a little bit with this one, right? So with CF Comic Fiesta in particular, so you were asking about whether there's any events like Comic Furo where there's a lot of local artists showing up. Comic Fiesta is actually the largest platform for such things.
In Asia or Malaysia?
So the truth is that we've never really truly compared with a lot of other places. Back when I was with the team, the number we knew were with like within Southeast Asia. I don't think it's unreasonable to look at it as throughout Southeast Asia at this point. Like, sorry, back when I was a team, I was just purely looking at Malaysia, and definitely in Malaysia there was no competition.
Right.
But I think right now, based on my understanding of things, it is within Southeast Asia.
Right.
The reason why I say that is because I think last year we had like the event had like 500 unique creators.
Oh wow.
Like, so that's not like, some would have double tables, some would have like double booths and stuff like that. So the total table space that was taken up was more than that, but like there was about 500 people,
Right.
or 500 groups, and then and it's growing year by year. There's a lot of people who get rejected, unfortunately. But yeah, so there's that.
Yeah.
This includes things like cosplayers to artists and like who draw. There are also people who write and all that kind of stuff. They're relatively rare in comparison, and all sorts. Comic Fiesta does tend to be so one huge thing to make Comic Fiesta a little different from Comic Furo or even Alpha ID, right?
Yep.
Or even Alpha in general is if you see a lot of other events, like Alpha is what I would call, or some people would refer to them as, commercial events.
Yes.
Where they pull in a lot of content from commercial bodies, as you were describing it earlier as well, where the core drive is the content they bring in from foreign foreign talent and IP and stuff like that. And that's great. Most of these type of events though, they usually, even when they have a creator corner and stuff like that, it's usually a ratio of about roughly like 70-30.
Right.
Like 70, like there's a very clear, like this is the majority of what the content is going to be. The majority of the content is going to be from foreign sources, kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
So that's Alpha. Then you look at Comic Furo, which is clearly 80-90% is going to be local talent and like local creators, or maybe even just foreign creators to come in who open a booth and things like that, right?
Yes,
and all that kind of stuff. So you have that kind of thing. CF is this kind of weird, unique event where it's 50-50. My personal experience with events is that this 50-50 is kind of rare.
Right.
Where it's equal parts fandom and equal parts commercial. It's I can't speak to whether it's better or worse. I'll be honest with you. There are people who think that CF should be more like Alpha. There are people who are like, CF is not supportive enough to the local talent and stuff like that. I honestly feel that the fact that both voices, like both type of voices, are equally loud, it's a good thing for CF. Like in a sense that no, like hey, there's a balance. You know?
Is that balance something you guys aim for, or does it just happen naturally? The 50-50 split?
I don't think it's something that anyone sort of targeted.
Right.
Like so, I've done a number of this already at this point, right? And the last one I had, was with Mandy, as I was mentioning. She's one of the first people, right? She's one of the few people that was sitting in the room, right, when they first decided to do their first year. She was there when they decided to do the second one,
Right.
and she was hit palming when they said they were going to do the third one. She was face palming. Was like, holy shit, no, I did not sign up for this. Anyway, the fact is, CF sort of became this thing because people liked it. Nobody wanted to give up on it. You know, I don't think that that's necessarily the same here. And part of this conversation is really just trying to understand what's the differences and what we do share in similarities. You know, that stuff like that.
Yeah.
But one big thing that we do seem to share is, at the very start at least, right, is that a lot of it comes from people who wanted to find a place to share their fandoms and stuff.
Absolutely.
You know, so like for Comic Fiesta, the initial founders and stuff, they said, hey, I'm drawing doujins for fun. You're drawing doujins for fun. Why don't we see whether we can get more people to come in and, you know, sell their doujins for fun?
Right.
You know, that kind of stuff.
Yeah. You will get those here as well, but there's also here some local creators somewhat become celebrities in their own right.
Of course.
They become famous to the point where you have to pre-order the merch that they sell, because otherwise if you just go there to their stand and you go, hey, can I buy this? Oh no, these are all reserved.
Yeah.
So there are some of these, and they make good stuff. That's why they're popular, clearly, and they make good money out of it. I know more than one artist who make a full-time living running Komifuro conventions. Not just Komifuro, just even the smaller ones too, and they
Just
also
doing conventions.
just doing conventions and selling stuff online. And they have I don't know if like I don't know how much exactly they make, but they can live from it. They don't need this is their full-time job. So that's also fascinating to me, because you kind of get really high quality stuff, which is probably just like 1% of the whole, because there's a lot of like younger artists, newer artists who are still trying to improve. But you find these people, and they're not. It's not official merch, but they're really good merch. So that's something.
Well, okay,
that
so
draws me to Komifuro.
right, so you brought up something that's really interesting, and really coming back to what I was talking about in terms of like how is like the question about how Comic Flow has changed in this last 12 years, right? Just to use this once again a point of comparison, right? When CF first started, a lot of people were doing what I call stapler bind doujins. So it's basically like you print it in A4, you photocopy the pages, and then you just grab a stapler and just pop your way home.
Yes.
That kind of thing, and you sell these, right? And so these were stapler bind doujins that like some people were doing. Some of them were really cheap. I think Mandy was sharing last time that like hers was like being sold at 50 cents.
50. Oh wow.
That's 50 cents. What would be a conversion here? Give me a second. Yeah, that would be like less than 20 Singaporean cents.
Yeah.
Which would be roughly about less than 1,000. Yeah, yeah, that's about right. Less than 1,000 rupiah, roughly about.
Wait, this is when you said 50 cents, 50 American cents?
No, like Malaysian cents.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I guess it's somewhere on.
Yeah, correct. So I'm doing a lot of like layered conversions here.
Right.
So you're roughly looking at 1,000 to 2,000 rupiah.
Sure. Something obscenely cheap.
Yeah, exactly. So that's what you were looking at. So that was what she was doing in the very, very early days of it, right?
Right.
Even like A5 prints wasn't a thing. Even poster prints wasn't a thing that had that popular yet. Then gradually over time, some people started exploring ideas of doing single cell prints instead of doing full doujins.
Right.
Because keep in mind, like the culture that a lot of us were comparing with for CF back in the day, right, was Comic Cat. And Comic Cat was known for selling its comics. Right. So a lot of people were thinking like, oh, if I'm going to sell stuff in a booth, I'm going to make comics. And so a lot of people started off that way. But then after that, some people go like, wait, drawing comics is kind of tough. And then like, but I can draw covers really nicely. I can draw illustrations really nicely. So people started doing more and more illustrations.
Yes.
You know? So that became an evolution within CF. And then gradually over time, I'm like, okay, we've drawn illustrations, like full illustration and all that kind of stuff. But then they realized, oh wait, but sometimes illustrations, like some people, like it's kind of boring after a while. Like how many prints can you put up on your screen, right? So some people started diversifying. Some people tried to do other things. So there was this time when keychains were really popular.
Yep.
Button badges were really popular.
Pins.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Pins and all that kind of stuff. We didn't get pins as much though.
Oh,
strangely.
okay.
Like we get button badges.
Mhm.
I don't know what you want to call those pins, but like button badges. We did button badges. Then there was like keychains at one time. And t-shirts were also popular at one time too. So like that was a thing. T-shirts were really, really iffy.
Right.
There were some people did it, but most people anyway. But yeah, so that was a whole thing. That was an evolution within the artist community within S.E.A. Nowadays, with things like Taobao and all that, like people like with the Chinese market being what it is, it's so easy to find Chinese manufacturers who are willing to take in foreign orders.
Right.
So people would explore all sorts of different merchandising nowadays.
Yes.
Like you occasionally get people who do rubber mats now, like play mats.
Like claim. Oh, yeah, yeah. With mouse pad material.
Yeah, exactly that.
Yeah,
So that kind of thing. You have people similarly still sell T-shirts. Some people do holographic prints now.
Right.
Some people would do weird, unique like fan magazines and
Right.
stuff like that. So the variety of content these days is still very has grown significantly. And it really comes back to like what type of content that you want to try and do and how do you think is the best way to present it for you. In Malaysia at least, there are definitely a lot of cases where there is a lot of what we call ikut trend kind of thing, where
Sure.
they're just following trends and they're like, oh yeah, we're just going to do this because it's really, really popular. It's really,
Right.
really easy to do.
Of course.
You know, if you contact printers especially or suppliers, they'll go like, oh yeah, we have this special on keychains. But why do you think they have a special on keychains?
Right.
It's because it's like, oh yeah, we've got a lot of keychains and like we bought them in bulk and we're going to like because we expect people to want to do this.
Yes.
You know, that kind of thing. So they're doing that, and then like, oh yeah, fine, you're gonna do you indulge in it. You know, you indulge in the special and stuff like that. Then you see at the event itself, like everybody selling keychains.
Yeah.
Right. So that's at least sometimes what happens over in CF.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
It becomes harder and harder to stand out
Right.
once you reach a critical mass of artists, right? So here, normally they have to really be in tune with what fandoms are currently popular with video games, and then you either lean in towards the popular one, or you take a bet and go like, I'm gonna do this fandom. There's less fans of it, but then I get less competition. And some of my fandoms, most of my fandoms, are pretty hard to find in Komifuro, but you always eventually I walk around the whole day and you see, wait, there it is, that's Final Fantasy 14 or something like that. And
14 is hard to find here.
it's growing, but is it big in Malaysia?
Okay, so Final Fantasy is pretty big in Malaysia.
Sure,
Right.
It's big everywhere.
14 specifically is kind of a hit and miss, to be
Right.
honest. In part because it's no longer like, you know, that one time when 14 became a meme.
Yes, the award winning.
Yeah, that joke, right? Like you would find 14 around
Yeah.
because of that.
Yes.
But yeah, no, I'm sorry. I was going to talk about like my own fandom and how difficult, easy it is sometimes to find some of this. Oh shit, my camera went dead.
Oh boy. Well, the recording is still okay. I think it's probably pretty recent.
Yeah. So guys, you're going to see the sleeping cat for a while. I'm just going to leave it alone. I'm not going to fix it because trying to fix it is its own weird thing. So I'm just going to leave it alone. You can't see it. I'm still doing hand gestures for no reason.
Sure.
But we're just going to turn this into a podcast.
Okay. Well.
Yeah.
So when we're talking about 14, and this goes actually, this is in my opinion,
Right.
this shows the trend of what can be popular in Indonesia.
Right.
If you can play it for free, it can be big. 14 requires you to have a credit card, right? So not everyone in Indonesia have credit cards. Not everyone have the disposable income because you do pay in dollars for that, which is unfortunately our currency's really weak compared to the dollar. So that's why you don't see as much of it. As opposed to mobile games like say Ark Knight or Genshin Impact or Honkai Star Rail, because everyone on the phone they can play that. So it's kind of free to play, not really, but you can play it for free, and that's generally one of the big barrier in Indonesia on whether or not a fandom can grow is how cheap is it to start, and so that's it. Why? What's your hard to find fandom?
It really isn't that hard to find per se.
Yeah.
So the thing is that, like, it's actually just purely rarer than I would expect it to be.
Okay.
So I'm only going to use last year for example, right? Because the last couple of years were the ones that I really started paying attention. I got like really into Hololive like in the last 2 years,
Yes.
and I'm a Takodachi unabashedly.
I have no idea who that is.
Yeah, that's fine. I actually walked in with an Ina bag and you did not point it out, so I know automatically that you're not one of us.
No,
It's fine.
No, I'm not.
I know it's fine.
It's fine.
But where I was getting at was that it was surprisingly difficult to find Ina merch that I was gonna buy.
Right.
This is gonna sound really bad. I'm not saying that there is really difficult to find Hololive merch in S.E.A. But what happens is that to find merch that felt attractive to me enough that I would spend money on
Right.
was really, really difficult.
Yeah.
That bag I bought last year, I was really, really happy with. It was literally the last bag that the guy had.
Oh. Guess she's more popular than I thought.
No, it's not that. I think it's just purely because it's that difficult to find quality
okay.
merch like that.
Right.
It's a really good bag.
It looks nice. It looks nice.
It's a really nice bag and it's a really good bag.
Right.
He had a bunch of other bags too, but like I'm an Ina guy.
Oh.
Anyway, so yeah. But just like getting to it, I think it is really difficult. I have a friend. I was someone else I was talking to on this show, Rachel. She herself found her own niche in Comic Fiesta, right? About 2 years back when she started doing Baldur's Gate stuff.
Baldur's Gate 3?
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, I hope I find some of those tomorrow.
Yeah, and I had a friend. In fact, funny story, right? Like I was talking to the guys at Larian.
Oh.
Yeah, because Larian has a studio in Malaysia.
Oh yeah, yeah. I
And,
remember you told me about this.
Yeah, so I dropped by, and we were talking about like like the fandoms in like regional fandoms kind of thing, and they were telling me about how like surprisingly the traction in Malaysia wasn't as big, and I was like, what?
Yeah.
But to be fair, I really wouldn't. I think like to the benefit of what you were sharing earlier, because not only is Baldur's Gate not a free game,
Yes. Yes.
right? Like it is highly Western. It's highly stylized in many ways. That it can be a little bit inaccessible.
Yeah. And you also need a decent computer to play.
Yeah. Once again, a bunch of accessibility
Right.
issues, right?
Yes.
So when you stack that on stacks, like the vast majority of Malaysians will not have access to Baldur's Gate,
Yeah.
right?
This is also why you probably won't see a lot of Baldur's Gate merch tomorrow, but go on.
So in many ways, like from what we've discussed and talked about so far, it seems that there's a lot of parallels, at least between Indonesia and Malaysia as well, in terms of like how a lot of us first started, how the general interest in anime and manga and all that kind of stuff gradually grew. Even in tokusatsu as well, it seems like it's actually grown for the very same reasons that any other geek fandom would have grown as well.
Right.
Specific to you though, I'm curious, like, because you mentioned that your initial influences were from tokusatsu and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But from what you've shared so far, it does feel that seemed to have faded a little bit for you. Has it faded for you a little bit?
A little bit. Because also tokusatsu kind of changed in style and aesthetics considerably from the Showa era to the it used to be a bit.
Your brother's a dead android.
Yeah, your brother is dead android. They tried to
They Robocop.
yeah, and they tried to force him into surgery and things like that.
Yeah.
So it was more serious. It was darker.
What did we grow up with?
The very
Traumatized for life, man.
the very first Kamen Rider was fighting Nazi robots, right? So that's what shockers were. And one of the monsters was Starfish Hitler. So
Really?
it was, there were some.
I clearly wasn't paying attention.
I'll look it up, but I'm pretty sure it was Starfish Hitler. But anyway, it did change at some point. because I think and this isn't just tokusatsu. I think every fandom eventually evolved to try and find younger fans, newer fans, because they want to regenerate their fan base, right? So if you look at the tokusatsu, the Kamen Riders now, they look like kids' toys, and I think it's meant to be that way.
Yeah, it's about merchandising,
It
right?
was well, I guess even the old one was about merchandising, but it's just a very different vibe. So the last one I really liked was, oh man, that was a while ago. I think it was Puga, and then after that, I didn't follow it as much. It just didn't appeal to me.
Do you think that this is a do you think that this change in your interest is reflected for the rest of Indonesia by and large, or is this just you?
No. I think Kamen Rider, even the newer ones are still pretty popular here. This is just me. I did also find other interests because I think most people branch out in what they like when they were a kid and when they grow up, right? So this one is just purely me. I just didn't. It didn't draw me in as much as the earlier one does. And maybe that's also because we always compare things with what we had in our childhood. And when it changes too much from that, we go like, well, this isn't what I...
This is what I signed up for.
Yeah. Which I think happens in a lot of fandoms. Not just Kamen Rider, really. So yeah. If I find a tokusatsu series that I look at, the premise is nice, I'd still watch it. I'm not gonna go like, well, I'm not gonna watch any tokusatsu anymore. But I now judge a product strictly from, do I find it interesting rather than, is this the genre that I like? So in that way, I guess I'm a bit open-minded in the fandoms that I enjoy. Some of my friends, they refuse to watch new genres at all. They just set, this is what I like, I'm just gonna watch this, I'm not gonna try other things. But now that was never my style, I guess.
No worries.
Yeah.
Well, okay. Okay, so it's getting pretty late, but I do want to ask a little bit about what we might be able to expect, or rather, I might be able to expect tomorrow.
Okay.
Because Comic Pro has been around for a while. You mentioned that the first Comic Pro you went to was in 2012.
Yes.
Like how many years? Like this is like what? How many? What number Comic Furo is this right now that we're
Okay.
going to?
So I never really counted, but it did go away during the pandemic, like most events, really.
So that's 12, 13, 14, 15, 16,
Yeah.
17, 18,
19.
19.
I think 2020 was the pandemic.
20. Is
Yeah,
it?
20 was the one where they skipped. I think.
So 20 they skipped,
I think.
right?
Oh yeah, I'm not really sure, but pretty sure 2020 and 2021. Also, you have to keep in mind that Comic Photo is now a twice a year thing.
Also, it's twice a year thing. Right?
Nowadays, early on it's like once a year,
Alright.
I believe, but nowadays because it is pretty popular,
Right.
we're gonna have another one later in the year
Alright.
in 2024. So at least 10. I've been to at
All
least
right.
10.
So how many? Like, so do you still remember when it started being like twice a year kind of thing?
I think that's pretty new. I think that's after the pandemic, or yeah, I think that started after the pandemic. I
Okay.
think.
Okay.
Yeah.
So basically, it was 12, 13, 14, 15, 16 for those who are keeping count.
Yeah.
17, 18, 19.
yeah, and then
2021's gone.
I think
so. That's 8 events beforehand.
I think
before. So when he came back, they did 2 in 2022, I assume.
Yes.
So that makes it 10.
Yeah.
And then this year, 2023 is another 2. So that's 12.
I think so. I could be wrong.
So this will be 15.
Yeah.
Roughly.
Roughly.
Give or take 3.
So because as you the reason that I was recommended to be your guide, right, is because my house is like within walking distance of the place that becomes the home of Komifuro. And because of that, that's why I don't count. I would just go home and I say, oh, advertisement for Komifuro. I guess we're going there again.
Oh, I know what I'm doing this weekend.
Yeah, something like that. It's always going to be a traffic jam, so that's one thing you're going to expect. Well, but you're not bringing a car tomorrow. You're staying in the hotel right next to the venue, so
Yeah.
this is not going to be a problem for you. For the rest of us, that's part of the experience. Getting stuck in the parking lot part of it.
So I should probably mention a couple of really funny things.
Okay.
Since you brought that up, right? So in the last few years, Comic Fiesta has more or less settled down in KLCC. That's Kuala Lumpur Convention Center.
Sure.
Which is the biggest convention center, arguably. I'm still doing hand gestures, by the way. Arguably, at the heart of KL,
Right.
Kuala Lumpur, where it's based. I say arguably because some people argue over how the floor plan is like and the total floor space that you can get, but I think it's really hard to argue over it these days anymore, because the fact is, like, the total square footage that Comic Fiesta just sticks out is just that much more.
Right.
And the thing is that Comic Fiesta actually has had the unique experience of visiting every I use this with heavy inverted commas, every major convention space there is within KL.
Oh.
They've been at the Mines Convention Center. They've been to the Putrajaya, not the Putrajaya, the Putra World Trade Center, the PWTC. That is the oldest, one of the oldest convention centers in KL. I say one off because, strictly speaking, I really don't know the age of these things at some level. It's been the Mines, Putra. Is there any else that, like, KLCC is the big one, obviously, right?
Right.
It's also been to Sunway Convention Center before. The only major place that, like, people like to hold conventions at, that CF hasn't actually taken up is the one in Mid Valley,
Right.
which a lot of people like to, like, in the past, tell CF to go to, and then they realize that no, the CF is just way too big after a while.
Right.
Especially last year. So I'm bringing this up because you mentioned about the traffic jam, right?
Yes.
So the year that CF was at the Mines, it basically resulted in a traffic jam that was so bad that there was I has hints of that right now,
Right.
where
The biggest fandom probably in Indonesia. I don't think that's happening this weekend, so you'll be okay. Convention food, really?
oh no, I'm talking about the one in Aeon.
Oh, and Aeon. Oh, yes,
yeah,
yes, yes. Okay, so that's because Aeon is a popular mall to begin with. Like, whether or not there's an event, there's going to be a lot of people there already. If you're going to try, you just tell me and I'll take you to the nicer places. That's what you have me here for. There's way better places.
Let's not paint anyone else's experiences with this privilege that we have right here, but this privileged relationship.
No, but also Aeon is not exactly next. Well, I mean, it's close enough, I suppose. It's
Right.
close enough. But there are, if nowadays you can see online where all the other restaurants are. If you just go the other way from Aeon, there's other places, there's other restaurants. People just go to Aeon because it's big and it's fancy looking and you can see it from afar, right? But the insider tip is to go the other way because that's where the culinary sector is, and it's just like a mile of just restaurants after restaurants after restaurants. So just go the other way, you'll be good.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, but yeah, yeah. I guess, okay, with that, I think with everything that's been happening, I think we're hitting the 2-hour mark roughly.
Yeah, we are.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think with that in mind, I think let's call it a night for tonight.
Yeah, we still have the convention tomorrow after all.
Exactly. So let's get some rest. Let's get some shut-eye.
All right.
We have plenty to do. What I will hope to do is that since I'm going to be re-uploading this, with any luck, I'll be posting a bunch of photos as well, like on my own page and stuff.
Sure.
Just as sort of a make good, if you will,
Sure.
of like the fact that we didn't share any photos tonight,
Right.
And for the lousy picture and stuff, the fact that most people will be seeing, if you're still seeing this as it is, this sleeping cat which is on the screen. Yeah. Anyways, but yeah, and yeah, well, with that, okay, let's go on to the last thing. So, Wisnu, before we go off, is there like I've asked this before, but I want to try and open up the the chance again, and I'll cut this since this is going to be re-uploaded as well, right?
Right.